Disclaimer: this content is only for mature audiences. Viewer discretion is advised. I never imagined I would be in this position, standing in the middle of my living room, heart racing, hands trembling, staring at my husband like he was a stranger. But here I was. And what I had just done, what he had made me do, it was unreal. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. If you've ever been in a relationship where things weren't quite what they seemed, you need to hear this story. And trust me, by the end of this, you're going to have a lot to say. So make sure to comment below. I want to know what you would have done in my place. Now, let's start from the beginning. Ethan and I had what most people would call a perfect marriage, or at least, that's what I thought. We met in our 20s, fell in love fast, and within a year, we were married. He was charming, attentive, the kind of man who remembered little details, like how I took my coffee or which side of the bed I preferred. He made me feel safe, loved. But as time went on, small things started to change. And I told myself it was normal. Relationships evolve, right? At first, it was little things. He'd get irritated over something as small as me forgetting to text back right away. Then came the jokes, sharp, cutting words hidden under a laugh. And then, it got worse. It wasn't just about what he did anymore. It became about what he wanted me to do. Things that felt wrong. Things that made me question who I even was. I can still hear his voice from that night, low and steady. If you love me, you'll do it. And I did. I did it. I still don't know if it was love or fear or some twisted sense of loyalty. But whatever it was, the moment it happened, I knew there was no going back. So, tell me, what would you have done? Have you ever been in a situation where love blurred the line between right and wrong? Drop a comment below, and let's talk about it. And if you want to hear the rest of what happened next, well, you won't want to miss the next part. Hit that like button, subscribe, and I'll see you soon. I remember the silence right after it happened. It wasn't the kind of silence that felt peaceful, it was thick, suffocating, like the air had been drained from the room. My hands were still shaking, my breath uneven. I couldn't even look at Ethan. But he was calm. Too calm. He leaned back, crossed his arms, and gave me this slow, satisfied nod, like I had passed some kind of test. That wasn't so hard, was it? He said, his voice smooth, almost amused. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Because if I let myself speak, I wasn't sure if I would whisper or scream. Looking back, I don't even know when things changed. It's scary how slowly it happens, how little shifts go unnoticed until suddenly, you're standing in a place you don't recognize, next to someone you don't really know. Ethan hadn't always been like this. Or maybe he had, and I just didn't see it. When we first met, he was thoughtful, patient. He made me feel like the most important person in the world. And maybe that was the problem. He didn't just love me, he owned me. I was his to shape, his to mold. And for a long time, I let him. I stopped seeing certain friends because he didn't like them. I started dressing the way he preferred. At first, I told myself it was just compromise, the way all relationships are. But real compromise means both people meet in the middle. With Ethan, it was always me moving, bending, adjusting. Until one day, I looked in the mirror and barely recognized myself. And now he had pushed me one step further. I swallowed hard and turned away, staring at the wall, trying to collect my thoughts. What had I done? And why did he look so pleased? Ethan stood up, walked over, and placed a hand on my shoulder. I flinched before I could stop myself. He laughed under his breath. Relax. It's over now. No. It wasn't. I could feel that it wasn't. I looked at him then, really looked at him, and something in my stomach twisted. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes, they were watching me carefully, waiting. For what? I didn't know. The worst part. Some small, twisted part of me still wanted to believe him. Wanted to trust that he knew what was best. Because if I admitted the truth that I had lost myself in him, I would have to do something about it. And I wasn't sure if I was ready for that yet. So, tell me, have you ever been in a situation where you felt like you weren't in control anymore? Where someone else's choices started shaping your life more than your own? Let me know in the comments. And if you think this story is intense now, just wait until you hear what happened next. Make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss part 3. You won't believe what's coming. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, my mind replayed everything over and over, the look on Ethan's face, the words he said, the thing I had done. No matter how many times I told myself it was over, that nothing could change it now, my stomach refused to settle. Something about it felt unfinished, like a door had been opened that I couldn't close. Ethan, on the other hand, slept just fine. I could hear his slow, steady breathing beside me, like he had no worries at all. Maybe to him, there was nothing to worry about. That thought scared me more than anything. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of coffee. Ethan was in the kitchen, humming to himself like everything was perfectly normal. He smiled when he saw me, sliding a cup toward me. "Morning. You okay?" I hesitated before nodding. Lying had become second nature. As I took a sip, I tried to act casual. "So, what happens now?" Ethan leaned against the counter, watching me carefully. "Nothing. We move on. Move on." Just like that. I wanted to believe it, but something inside me screamed that it wasn't that simple. My phone buzzed on the table, making me jump. When I picked it up, my stomach twisted. It was a message from her. The one person I wasn't supposed to hear from again. "We need to talk. I know what you did." My hands went cold. I glanced at Ethan, but he was busy scrolling through his own phone, completely unaware. Or maybe he wasn't. Maybe he was just waiting to see what I would do next. I forced myself to breathe and typed back. "I can't talk right now." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. A long pause. Then finally, a reply. "Then meet me. Tonight. Same place." I locked my phone and pushed it away, my heart pounding. I should have ignored it. I should have deleted the message and pretended it never happened. But I already knew I wouldn't. That night, after Ethan fell asleep, I slipped out of bed and grabbed my keys. I barely recognized myself anymore. The woman who once planned her life so carefully was now sneaking out of her own house like a stranger. The meeting place was a small parking lot near the edge of town. Dark, quiet, and completely isolated. My headlights cut through the night as I pulled in, my pulse thudding in my ears. She was already there, leaning against her car, arms crossed. "You actually came," she said, her voice sharp. I swallowed hard. "What do you want?" She took a step closer, her expression unreadable. "I think the better question is, what happens when Ethan finds out?" I felt the air leave my lungs. "So, what do you guys think? Should I have met her? And what do you think she knows?" Drop your predictions in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe because trust me, this story is far from over. The air between us was thick with tension. She stared at me, her expression unreadable, waiting for a reaction. My fingers tightened around my keys, and for a second, I considered turning around, getting back in my car, and driving away. Pretending this never happened. But I knew I couldn't. "What do you mean, when Ethan finds out?" My voice came out quieter than I wanted it to. She let out a slow breath and shook her head. "You don't get it, do you? You're not the first." The words sent a chill down my spine. I swallowed hard, trying to process what she was saying. "The first what?" She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "The first person has pulled into something like this." My heartbeat pounded in my ears. "That's not possible," I whispered. "He wouldn't," she laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You really think you're special? That he changed for you?" "No. He finds people like us. People who trust too easily. And then he tests them." I shook my head, refusing to believe it. "No. He loves me." Her eyes softened, but the pity in them made my stomach turn. "Is that what he told you? That everything he does is because he loves you?" She exhaled, shaking her head. "Love doesn't look like this." I felt sick. I wanted to argue, to tell her she was wrong, that she didn't know Ethan like I did. But deep down, I wasn't sure I believed that anymore. She reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. A few taps, then she turned the screen toward me. "Watch this." I hesitated, then looked. And the moment I did, my whole world cracked. It was Ethan. His voice, his face. But it wasn't a version of him I had ever seen before. His words were sharp, cold, calculated. And he wasn't talking to me. He was talking to someone else. Saying the same things. Making the same promises. My stomach twisted as realization crashed over me. Now do you see, she said softly. I could barely breathe. Why are you telling me this? She looked me dead in the eyes. Because I know what he made you do. And I know what comes next. A shiver ran down my spine. What do you mean? She glanced around, as if making sure we were alone, then leaned in. If you don't leave now, you won't get another chance. I stared at her, my pulse racing. Leave? Just walk away? After everything? Could I even do that? And if I did, what would Ethan do to me? I took a shaky breath. I need to think. She sighed, stepping back. Don't take too long. Because once he realizes you know the truth, she hesitated. It might already be too late. So what do you guys think? Should I run? Or am I already trapped? Drop your thoughts in the comments, I need to know what you would do. And don't miss the next part, because the worst is yet to come. I barely remember the drive home. My hands felt numb against the steering wheel, my thoughts racing too fast to catch. Every word she said kept repeating in my head, over and over. You're not the first. If you don't leave now, you won't get another chance. But I wasn't ready to leave. Not yet. Ethan was still asleep when I got back. I stood in the doorway of our bedroom, watching him. He looked so peaceful, so normal. How could someone who had done all these things look so ordinary? It made my stomach turn. I needed proof. I needed something real, something that couldn't be explained away. Slowly, carefully, I took his phone from the nightstand. My heart pounded as I stepped back into the hallway, unlocking it with the code I'd memorized long ago. Messages. Emails. Photos. At first, nothing stood out. Just work conversations, reminders, the usual. But then I saw it, a folder buried inside another, labeled with nothing but a single dot. I clicked on it. And everything inside made my blood run cold. Videos. Recordings. Conversations. Not just of me, but of others. Women I didn't recognize. Different places, different situations, but the same manipulation, the same control. Ethan's voice, smooth and confident, leading them down paths they couldn't turn back from. My hands shook as I scrolled. Then I saw her, the woman I had just met in the parking lot. Her face was tight with fear, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't want to do this. Ethan's response was calm, almost amused. But you already have. I slammed the phone shut, pressing it to my chest as my breath came fast and uneven. The room felt smaller, the walls closing in. My head spun with the weight of it all. He had done this before. He had planned this. And then I heard it. A soft creak from behind me. I turned slowly, my stomach dropping. Ethan was awake. Standing in the doorway. Watching me. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The air was thick with something I couldn't name, something dangerous. Then, so casually it made my skin crawl, he smiled. Find something interesting? I swallowed, forcing my face to stay neutral. Just checking my messages. His eyes flickered to his phone in my hands. He didn't move. He didn't ask for it back. He just stared at me, the smile never fading. I think we should talk, he said finally. My heart pounded so hard I thought he might hear it. What do you guys think? Is this the moment I should run? Or is it already too late? Drop your thoughts in the comments, I need to know what you would do. And don't forget to like and subscribe, because trust me, the next part? It changes everything. My fingers tightened around his phone, but I forced myself to breathe, to stay calm. I couldn't let him see my fear. Not now. Ethan took a slow step forward, his expression unreadable. You've been quiet, he said. That's not like you. I swallowed hard. Just tired. His gaze flickered to the phone in my hands. I could see it in his eyes, he knew. Maybe not everything, but enough. He let out a soft sigh, tilting his head. I really hoped you wouldn't make this difficult. A chill ran down my spine. I don't know what you mean, I said carefully, inching toward the nightstand. If I could just slip the phone back before he noticed. Ethan moved fast. Too fast. 1 second, he was across the room. The next, his hand was wrapped around my wrist, holding it in place. I saw you leave tonight, he murmured. And I saw who you met. My breath caught. He shook his head, almost disappointed. I told myself you'd be different. His grip tightened. Not enough to hurt, just enough to remind me who was in control. Or at least, who thought he was. I forced myself to meet his eyes. So what happens now? A small smile. That depends on you. I didn't wait. Before he could react, I twisted my wrist hard, breaking free from his grip. In the same motion, I grabbed the lamp from the nightstand and swung. The crash echoed through the room as it shattered against him. He staggered back, cursing, and I ran. Down the hallway. Down the stairs. Toward the front door. A hand grabbed my shoulder, yanking me back. Ethan spun me around, his face dark with something I'd never seen before. You really don't want to do this, he hissed. My heart pounded. He was blocking the door, his chest rising and falling with slow, measured breaths. He wasn't panicking. He wasn't scared. He was thinking. That was worse. I had seconds. Maybe less. Then a sound cut through the tension, the sharp blare of a car horn from outside. Ethan's eyes flicked toward the window. And in that moment, I ran again. I threw open the door and sprinted outside. Headlights blinded me for a second before the car door flew open. Get in. It was her. Without hesitation, I dove into the passenger seat. Tires screeched as she hit the gas, sending us speeding down the road. My pulse was still hammering, my breath coming in sharp gasps. Neither of us spoke for a long time. Finally, she glanced at me. You okay? I let out a shaky laugh, wiping at my face. I don't know. She nodded, gripping the wheel. I told you. He doesn't stop. I turned back, looking over my shoulder. The house was getting smaller in the distance. But something told me this wasn't over. Not yet. So what do you guys think? Is this really the end? Or is Ethan still out there? Let me know in the comments, because something tells me this story isn't finished. The road stretched ahead, endless and dark, but for the first time in a long while, I felt something close to relief. The woman beside me, Emma, drove in silence, her hands gripping the wheel tightly, her eyes fixed on the road. I wasn't sure where we were going. I didn't care. All that mattered was that I was away. Minutes passed before she finally spoke. He'll come looking for you. I nodded, staring out at the blur of trees rushing past. I know. She hesitated. What are you going to do? I had no answer. I had spent so long trapped in Ethan's world that I had forgotten how to exist outside of it. Everything about my life had been carefully molded by him, what I wore, how I spoke, where I went. Even my thoughts had been shaped by his expectations. Now, without him, I felt like a blank page. But maybe that was a good thing. Maybe I could finally start writing my own story. I turned to Emma. What did you do? Her jaw tightened, and she let out a slow breath. I disappeared. I swallowed. Did it work? She glanced at me, her expression unreadable. For a while. Her words sent a shiver through me. I looked back at the road, my fingers pressing into my palms. No matter how far I ran, there was always the possibility that Ethan would find me. The thought was suffocating. Emma must have sensed my panic because her voice softened. But you're smarter than he thinks. Stronger, too. I let her words settle in. Maybe she was right. Maybe Ethan had spent so long controlling me that he had forgotten one important thing. I knew him too. I knew his patterns, his tricks, his weaknesses. And that meant I could stay one step ahead. The car slowed as we reached a small motel on the outskirts of town. Emma parked and turned to me. You can stay here for the night. After that, it's up to you. I nodded, gripping the door handle. But before I stepped out, I looked at her. Why did you help me? Her expression softened. Because someone once helped me. I felt a lump form in my throat. Without another word, I stepped out of the car, watching as she drove off into the night. Alone, I took a deep breath and walked toward the motel entrance. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring. I didn't know if Ethan would come looking for me. But for now, I had a choice. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough. So, what do you guys think? Is this really the end? Or is this just the beginning of something bigger? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear what you would do in my situation. And if you want to see what happens next, make sure to like and subscribe. Because trust me, this story is far from over.